Good morning. Our devotion today comes from Psalm 37. In fact, to follow up this devotion, you would do yourself a great favor if you just read the whole psalm. Read it once this morning, stop at noon and read it again, and then read it tonight before you go to bed. The whole psalm is themed at the beginning in the first verse that says, "Do not fret because of evil men if they seem to be successful in their ways. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither, and like green plants, they will soon die away." The whole point of the psalm is that while you experience in this life some injustices, while you see the unfairness of people who are committed to unbelief and wickedness seem to be successful and blessed, while you see the inequities where good people die young and bad people live long, don't just think that God will not ultimately fix everything according to his sovereignty, his justice, and his grace. This psalm teaches us to wait for it. You know, we hear that sometimes. You'll be watching a little video on TV or on your phone, on your TikTok, and you'll see someone that'll type out on there, wait for it, you got to wait to the end. We have to wait to the end sometimes. And for a lot of us who've lived a while, the end is somewhere in the middle of our life, the end of a thing or a matter that we can see with our eyes. But ultimately, the whole end of all things is not until we reach heaven. But a real important characteristic of faith is learning to wait for God. In the Bible, it's called waiting on the Lord. Isaiah 40 talks about waiting on the Lord. And one of the greatest stories about waiting on the Lord is Joseph in the Old Testament, in the last 20 chapters of the book of Genesis. He had a vision and a dream that he was someday going to be the one that his whole family bowed down to. He told them that dream. His jealous brothers sold him into slavery. He was in Potiphar's house as a slave, and Potiphar's wife hit on him and lied about him, saying the opposite, and he was thrown into jail. And then he was forgotten in jail by a couple of the Pharaoh's most important aristocrats, the baker and the cupbearer, and he was forgotten by the cupbearer. And then finally, when he gets remembered and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams, he ends up second in command of all Egypt, and he manages the greatest economic feat in the known world at that time, and that is they survive a very long famine because of the grain they store up in the fat years. And his brothers come and bow down to him just like his visions. But he had to wait 20 years for all of that to be fulfilled. But the fact that he learned that God had a gracious plan in the allowing the difficulties and the evils to happen in his life taught Joseph to trust God and be loving and generous. And so generosity comes out of learning to trust God. We don't get caught up in the tit for tat and getting even. We don't get caught up in bitterness and anger over things as if we can judge a matter before it's finished. Don't judge God, and don't even judge the wicked before a matter is finished, because in all situations, in his sovereignty, he's working out his justice and grace, all in perfect harmony, and we won't see it until he reveals it to us, and sometimes that's not until we get to heaven. But in this life, we have all these little dress rehearsals where we see things work out. I've got story after story in my personal life where I judged a matter to be bad and terrible, and I was mistreated, and I wanted to be eaten up with getting even and angry, when in fact, God was using the wrong thing the other person did to move me into the right place to bless me. And that's so important that you get those thoughts down. God often allows the wrong thing to happen to you from another person. They do wrong, so he can move you into the right place to give you blessing. That's the story of Joseph. That's the story of Christians everywhere. That's the story of God's people with a God who is sovereign and just and gracious. And Psalm 37 kind of bears that out. The section of the psalm I want to read to you before I close is about learning in faith to commit your way to the Lord and be generous even in the face of wrongdoing, and watch that the Lord works it out and maybe even makes you inherit much of what you were getting was being taken away from you, and then some. Verse 5 through verse 15. 5 to 15. Commit your way to the Lord and trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn. Your vindication will be like the noonday sun. So be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways and when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn away from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, wait for it, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek, who let God be in control and they don't try to control things themselves, that's what meekness is. The meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow, to bring down the poor and needy and to slay those whose ways are upright. But their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. Better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. I was young, and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, or their children begging bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be a blessing. Be a blessing today by trusting in the Lord and not being a grouch and not being fretting over evildoers, but putting it all that trust in the Lord and learning to be generous even in a hard time. And he will reward you in his time, just like he did Old Testament Joseph. I might add, just the way he did Abraham, just the way he did David, just the way he did Daniel. See, in every generation, he raises up these examples in the Bible, and then he displays it in front of us so that in our generation, we'll be those Daniels and those Davids that work with the Lord and learn to trust him and don't give in to anger or bitterness. And we learn to be generous no matter where we are, just like God is gracious and generous to us. And then that generosity shows that we know God and understand him, because he's generous to the sinner as well as the righteous. And we're like God that way. And then when we're showing that we are like God and we will act like God, like Joseph did, he's free to bless us because we will be his conduit. Think about all of these things. Read Psalm 37 and have a great day making God happy.